Good evening, and welcome back to SleepTime Historian. Tonight, we're leaving behind the quiet fields of medieval Europe. You wake before the sun has even considered rising. There is no alarm clock to stir you from sleep, no soft glow from a bedside lamp, and certainly no warmth waiting to greet you. Instead, your eyes slowly open to near darkness inside a Viking longhouse. The only light comes from a few glowing embers resting in the great hearth at the center of the room, their faint orange glow barely reaching the heavy wooden beams above. The air is cold enough that each breath feels sharp as it enters your lungs, and for a few quiet moments you remain wrapped beneath a thick wool blanket, wishing you could stay there just a little longer. Around you, the longhouse is almost completely silent. You can hear the gentle breathing of family members still asleep, the occasional rustle of straw beneath someone's bed, and somewhere farther down the hall, the soft shifting of a sheep that spent the night inside the building to stay warm. Life here wastes nothing. Animals provide heat during the long northern nights, and every small advantage can mean the difference between comfort and suffering. Slowly, you sit upright. Your muscles already feel stiff before the day's work has even begun. Yesterday's labor has not yet left your body, and neither will today's by the time night returns. This is simply how life has always been. There are no weekends, no holidays from survival. Every sunrise asks something of you, and every sunset rewards you with little more than another chance to wake again tomorrow. You pull on a rough wool tunic that still carries the faint smell of smoke from countless evenings spent beside the fire. Thick wool trousers follow, along with worn leather boots that have been repaired so many times you can hardly remember what they originally looked like. Nothing is replaced unless absolutely necessary. Every piece of clothing requires weeks of spinning wool, weaving cloth, sewing by hand, and careful maintenance. Even a simple cloak represents months of work. Throwing something away would be unthinkable. Before anyone speaks, one member of the household quietly kneels beside the hearth. With practiced hands, they gather dry moss, tiny twigs, and carefully preserved embers beneath a small pile of kindling. A few gentle breaths, a faint curl of smoke, then the first tiny flame appears. Gradually the fire awakens, crackling softly as fresh wood is added one piece at a time. Warmth slowly begins spreading throughout the longhouse, though it will take quite some time before the cold truly retreats. Fire is not merely comfort here. It is life itself. Without it, food cannot be cooked. Tools cannot be repaired. Clothing cannot be dried. Families cannot survive the brutal Scandinavian winters. As the flames grow stronger, more people begin waking. There is no rushing, no loud conversation, only quiet movements as each person prepares for another ordinary day. Children rub sleep from their eyes while older family members begin gathering wooden bowls, simple knives, and yesterday's coarse bread. Breakfast is modest, just enough to provide strength for the long hours ahead. Perhaps a small piece of dried fish caught weeks earlier. Maybe porridge made from barley or oats. Sometimes a little butter if supplies allow. Fresh fruit is rare during much of the year, and sugar is something you have never tasted. Every meal reminds you that food is fuel before it is pleasure. Outside, the darkness slowly begins giving way to the faintest shades of blue along the eastern horizon. Someone quietly opens the heavy wooden door. Instantly, freezing air rushes inside, carrying with it the clean scent of pine forests, damp earth, and distant seawater drifting inland from the nearby fjord. You step outside and pause for a moment. Before you stretches a landscape unlike almost anywhere else in Europe. Towering mountains rise beyond the village, their peaks still dusted with snow even though the lower valleys have begun welcoming spring. Dense forests blanket the hillsides, while narrow streams carry icy water toward the sea. The village itself is small, perhaps only a handful of longhouses gathered together for protection and cooperation. Thin trails of smoke already rise into the morning sky as neighboring families awaken one by one. Somewhere nearby, a rooster announces the coming day, though its call is quickly swallowed by the whisper of the northern wind. It is beautiful, but beauty alone has never fed anyone here. Before the sun has fully risen above the mountains, the work will begin once again. The village slowly comes to life around you. One by one, the heavy wooden doors of neighboring longhouses creak open, and small figures wrapped in thick wool cloaks step into the cold morning air. Nobody rushes. There is no shouting, no hurried footsteps, no unnecessary conversation. Every person knows what awaits them because today will look almost exactly like yesterday, and tomorrow will likely be the same. The rhythm of Viking life is as predictable as the changing seasons, and that rhythm has shaped every family in the village for generations. As you begin walking along the narrow dirt path, your boots press into damp earth still soaked from melting frost. Small puddles reflect the pale morning sky, while thin wisps of mist drift lazily across the open fields beyond the village. The cold northern air fills your lungs with every breath, carrying the scent of wet grass, pine trees, with smoke and distant salt water from the nearby fjord. It is an unmistakable smell, fresh, clean, and slightly harsh, reminding you that nature here is both beautiful and unforgiving. You glance toward the shoreline where several longships rest quietly beside a simple wooden dock. Their carved dragon heads face the calm water as though patiently waiting for another journey. To many people centuries in the future, these ships will become symbols of fearless exploration and legendary raids. But to you, they represent something much simpler. They are fishing boats, trading vessels, lifelines. They carry food, timber, wool, iron, and hope between scattered settlements that would otherwise remain isolated for much of the year. A damaged ship is not merely an inconvenience. It can mean hunger. It can mean losing contact with neighboring villages before winter closes the sea. Not every Viking will ever sail across distant oceans. Most spend their entire lives close to home, working the same land their parents once worked. As you continue walking, you pass several villagers already beginning their daily routines. An elderly man kneels beside a wooden cart, tightening a loose wheel with a simple iron tool. A young woman carries two heavy buckets suspended from a wooden yoke across her shoulders, carefully making her way toward the village well. Nearby, two children gather fallen branches left behind by last night's wind, laughing quietly as they compete to find the largest pieces of firewood. Even play often becomes useful work. Nothing gathered here is wasted. Every stick may help warm the hearth during a cold evening. Every handful of moss may help start tomorrow's fire. Every moment of daylight has value. The village itself is modest but carefully organized. Longhouses stand facing one another across open spaces where animals are sometimes gathered. Small storage buildings protect precious grain from damp weather and hungry rodents. Wooden fences mark gardens that will soon produce onions, cabbage, beans, and herbs once the growing season fully begins. Beyond them lie rough grazing fields where sheep, goats, and cattle spend much of the warmer months. Everything has been built by hand using timber cut from nearby forests and stone collected from the surrounding land. There are no grand palaces here, no marble temples, no towering city walls. Yet every building represents hundreds of hours of labor shared among neighbors who understand that survival depends upon cooperation as much as individual effort. The first rays of sunlight finally reach the rooftops, turning the morning mist into glowing ribbons of gold. Birds begin singing from the surrounding pine trees, and somewhere in the distance you hear the steady tapping of a woodpecker searching for insects beneath rough bark. For just a few quiet moments, the village feels almost peaceful enough to make you forget how demanding life truly is. But only for a moment. Soon, tools will be lifted, fields will be crossed, nets will be repaired, wood will be chopped, animals will be fed, meals will be earned rather than expected. As you look across the awakening village, you realize something that no saga or legend could ever fully capture. The true strength of the Vikings was not found only aboard their famous ships or upon distant battlefields. It was found here in ordinary mornings like this one, where survival began long before any adventure ever reached the sea. The village is fully awake by the time the sun climbs above the eastern hills. Thin streams of smoke rise from every longhouse, drifting lazily into the cool Scandinavian sky. The warmth of the hearths remains behind you now, replaced by the crisp morning air that carries the scent of damp earth, pine forests, and distant seawater. The day has truly begun. Unlike the stories that future generations will tell, most Viking mornings do not begin with swords or longships sailing toward distant kingdoms. They begin with chores. You make your way toward the animal pens beside the longhouse. Several sheep greet you with impatient bleats, while 2 goats stand waiting near the wooden gate. They depend entirely on the family for food during the colder months, and before anyone thinks about breakfast or rest, the animals must be cared for. Bundles of dried hay are lifted from a nearby storage shed. Every handful was gathered during the previous summer, carefully dried beneath the sun, and protected from moisture throughout the long winter. Nothing can be wasted. You scatter the hay across the enclosure, watching the animals eagerly lower their heads to eat. Nearby, a sturdy brown cow waits quietly beneath a simple wooden shelter. She is among the household's greatest treasures. Her milk provides nourishment almost every day, and from it come butter and cheese that can last through difficult seasons. You gently place a wooden bucket beneath her before beginning the slow, familiar rhythm of milking. The steady sound echoes softly through the peaceful morning. A few chickens wander freely around the yard, scratching beneath patches of melting frost in search of insects. Children laugh quietly as they collect fresh eggs into woven baskets. Even the youngest members of the village understand that everyone has responsibilities. Childhood exists here, but it is closely tied to learning the work that keeps a family alive. As you finish tending the animals, your eyes drift toward the surrounding mountains. Their snow-covered peaks shine brilliantly beneath the rising sun. Streams of crystal-clear water flow down rocky slopes, feeding rivers that eventually reach the nearby fjord. It is a breathtaking landscape, yet its beauty hides constant hardship. The growing season is short, the winters are long, the soil is rocky, every harvest is uncertain. Nature gives generously only to those willing to work without complaint. You understand why the people here respect the land so deeply. It demands everything, yet it gives just enough in return. Once the animals have been fed, there is barely time to rest. The real work of the day is only beginning. You walk toward a small timber shed where the family's farming tools have been carefully stored. Leaning against the wall are wooden rakes, iron hoes, axes polished smooth by years of use, and heavy digging sticks worn by countless seasons of labor. None of them are beautiful, None of them are comfortable, but every one of them is essential. You reach for a broad iron hoe, feeling its familiar weight settle into your hands. The handle bears tiny cracks from years of hard work, carefully repaired instead of replaced. In a Viking village, tools are far too valuable to discard simply because they have grown old. Outside the village, several families are already walking toward their fields together. There is little conversation, only the crunch of boots across damp ground and the distant calls of ravens circling high above the forest. Everyone understands today's purpose. The fields stretch across the valley in small, uneven patches carved from the wilderness generations ago. Stones line the edges where families patiently cleared the land one rock at a time. Even after centuries of farming, the earth continues revealing new obstacles beneath the soil. You sink the blade of the hoe into the cold ground. Again and again. The work is slow. Every movement demands strength. There are no machines to lighten the burden. Only human hands, determination, and time. As the hours pass, the morning chill gradually disappears beneath the warmth of steady labor. Sweat forms despite the cool air. Your shoulders begin to ache. Small blisters, healed countless times before, remind you that this life rewards persistence far more than comfort. Looking across the valley, you notice dozens of other villagers working exactly as you are. Some repair fences damaged by winter storms. Others spread manure across the fields to prepare the soil. A few guide sturdy oxen through heavier ground using simple wooden plows. No one appears wealthy. No one appears idle. The entire village moves together like the parts of a single living machine. This is the reality of Viking life that history often forgets. Long before the famous voyages, before the raids, before the legends, there were fields waiting to be planted, animals waiting to be fed, homes waiting to be repaired, and ordinary people who worked from sunrise until sunset, not for glory, but simply for another chance to survive tomorrow. By the time the sun reaches higher into the sky, the morning mist has completely disappeared. A cool breeze drifts through the valley, carrying the scent of pine needles, damp earth, and salt from the nearby fjord. The work in the fields continues without pause, but today your responsibilities will soon take you somewhere different. The family needs fish, not as a luxury, but as a necessity. The sea provides food throughout the year, especially when the land cannot. While crops fail, fish continue swimming beneath the cold northern waters. For countless Viking families, the fjord is every bit as important as the fields surrounding the village. You leave your tools behind and begin walking toward the shoreline. The path winds gently downhill between towering pine trees whose branches sway softly in the morning wind. Sunlight filters through the forest canopy, creating moving patches of light across the narrow trail. Birds sing overhead while somewhere deeper in the woods, a woodpecker rhythmically strikes an old tree trunk. The forest feels peaceful, yet you know it deserves respect. Wolves still roam these woods. Brown bears occasionally wander through in search of food. Although such encounters are uncommon, every villager remains alert whenever traveling alone. After nearly half an hour of walking, the trees begin to thin. The smell of salt water grows stronger. Then suddenly the fjord appears before you. It stretches toward the distant horizon like polished glass, perfectly reflecting the mountains rising on either side. Snow still clings to their highest peaks, while waterfalls tumble down rocky cliffs into the calm blue water below. It is one of the most beautiful places you have ever seen. Several longships rest quietly beside a simple wooden dock. Despite the stories told centuries later, most of these vessels are not preparing for battle. They are preparing for fishing. Men quietly inspect ropes. Others untangle heavy fishing nets spread across the dock. One elderly fisherman carefully sharpens a small iron knife while another checks wooden oars for tiny cracks that could become dangerous out on the water. There is no shouting, only quiet concentration. Every person understands that mistakes on the sea can become deadly far more quickly than mistakes on land. You help lift one of the rolled fishing nets onto your shoulder. It is surprisingly heavy. Made from tightly twisted natural fibers, every knot has been tied by hand. Creating a single net requires weeks of patient work. Repairing one never truly ends. A small tear ignored today may become a large hole tomorrow. And a large hole could mean returning home without enough food for the family. Nothing here is taken for granted. Not the boat. Not the nets. Not even the calm weather, because everyone knows the sea can change its mood without warning. The small fishing boat glides quietly away from the shore. The only sounds are the steady splash of wooden oars entering the water and the occasional cry of seabirds circling high above. Behind you, the village slowly becomes smaller until the longhouses appear as tiny dark shapes resting beneath the towering mountains. Out here, everything feels larger. The sky, the sea, the silence. Cold air brushes gently across your face as the boat moves farther into the fjord. The water is astonishingly clear. Looking over the side, you can see long strands of seaweed swaying beneath the surface while tiny silver fish dart between them. One of the older fishermen nods quietly. It is time. Together, everyone carefully lowers the fishing net into the water. No one rushes. Years of experience have taught these people patience. Fishing is never guaranteed. Sometimes the nets return full. Sometimes nearly empty. Nature decides. Humans simply adapt. While waiting, the boat drifts peacefully across the calm water. The older men begin speaking softly, sharing stories they have told countless times before. Not tales of great kings or famous warriors. Instead, they speak about unusually harsh winters, about storms that lasted for days, about the enormous fish caught by fathers and grandfathers many years ago. History here is remembered through conversation rather than books. Each story carries a lesson. Each memory becomes knowledge passed to the next generation. After some time, everyone grips the ropes once again. The net feels heavier now. Slowly, patiently, it rises from the dark water. Dozens of shimmering fish struggle within its woven threads, their silver scales flashing brightly beneath the afternoon sun. A quiet smile spreads across every face. Not excitement, relief. This catch means food. Some fish will be cooked tonight. Others will be cleaned, salted, and hung to dry inside wooden sheds where cold northern winds preserve them for months. Nothing will be wasted. Even fish bones may later be boiled into broth. As the boat turns toward the village once again, you realize something surprising. For all the legends surrounding the Vikings, moments like these made up far more of their lives than battles ever did. Hours spent rowing, waiting, repairing, working together, trusting the sea, depending upon one another. The greatest victories were often the quiet ones, returning home with enough food for another week. And as the village slowly comes back into view beneath the towering mountains, you begin to understand that survival here was never built upon glory. It was built upon ordinary days, repeated over and over again, until they became an extraordinary life. The afternoon slowly begins to fade as you carry the day's catch back toward the village. The path follows the edge of the fjord before climbing gently through the pine forest once again. The boat has been pulled safely onto the shore, the nets carefully folded, and baskets filled with fresh fish now rest upon sturdy wooden sleds and shoulders. They are heavy, but nobody complains. Every fish carried home is another meal earned through patience and hard work. As you approach the village, the familiar sounds of everyday life grow louder. Axes strike wood with steady rhythm. Children laugh somewhere between the longhouses. A blacksmith's hammer rings against glowing iron inside a small workshop. Sheep call from their enclosure while chickens wander freely through the muddy paths, searching for scraps. The village feels alive, not with excitement, but with purpose. You help carry the baskets toward a wooden drying rack standing beside one of the storage buildings. Several villagers are already preparing fish for preservation. Each fish is cleaned with remarkable speed using small iron knives sharpened countless times over the years. Heads are removed, the insides carefully cleaned, and the flesh rubbed generously with coarse salt before being hung beneath simple wooden shelters where cool northern winds will slowly dry them. This food must last, perhaps for weeks, perhaps for months. Nobody knows exactly how long the next winter will be. Preparation always begins long before the cold arrives. Nearby, an elderly woman stirs a large iron pot hanging above an outdoor fire. The rich aroma of fish broth mixes with the smell of burning pine, filling the cool afternoon air with comforting warmth. A few herbs gathered from nearby meadows float gently across the bubbling surface. Even the simplest meal requires hours of quiet work before it reaches the table. Nothing here comes quickly. Nothing comes easily. As you continue walking through the village, you notice several men repairing the roof of a neighboring longhouse. Bundles of fresh turf are carefully placed across the wooden beams to replace sections damaged during the previous winter. Others strengthen the outer walls by fitting new timber between existing supports. A Viking home is never truly finished. Every season leaves behind something that must be repaired before the next arrives. As the sun slowly sinks behind the mountains, a golden light spreads across the valley. Long shadows stretch between the longhouses while thin trails of smoke rise peacefully into the calm evening sky. The day's hardest work is finally over. Families gradually begin gathering inside their homes. You step back into the warmth of the longhouse, immediately greeted by the familiar crackling of the central hearth. The fire burns brighter now than it did before sunrise, casting a soft orange glow across rough timber walls blackened by years of smoke. The warmth feels deeply satisfying after spending the entire day beneath the cool northern sky. Everyone takes their place around the fire. There are no large wooden tables covered with luxurious meals. Instead, simple wooden bowls are passed from one pair of hands to another. Tonight's supper consists of freshly caught fish, thick barley porridge, dark bread baked several days earlier, and a small piece of soft cheese made from the family's own milk. It is modest, but after a full day of labor, it tastes better than any feast. Conversation remains gentle. Children excitedly describe finding bird nests near the forest. An older fisherman quietly speaks about changes in the weather, wondering if stronger winds might arrive before the week's end. Someone laughs softly after telling a familiar story everyone has heard dozens of times before. No one seems to mind hearing it again. Stories become traditions. Traditions become memories. And memories become part of the family's history. After the meal, work does not immediately end. One woman begins spinning fresh wool into thread using a simple spindle. Another family member carefully repairs a torn leather boot. A young boy carves a small wooden spoon beneath the firelight while an elderly grandfather quietly sharpens an axe for tomorrow. Evening is simply another part of the working day. Outside, darkness slowly settles across the village. The wind whispers gently through the surrounding pine trees. Far away, waves quietly lap against the wooden docks beside the fjord. You step outside for one final moment before sleeping. Above you stretches a sky filled with countless stars, brighter than almost anywhere in the modern world. There are no city lights, no engines, no distant traffic, only silence. Standing there beneath the vast northern sky, you finally understand something few people think about today. The true heart of Viking life was never constant adventure. It was family, community, daily work, and the quiet hope that tomorrow would be just a little kinder than today. Night passes quietly inside the longhouse. The fire at its center never burns brightly enough to fill the room with heat, yet it never dies completely either. Someone always makes certain that glowing embers survive until morning. Relighting a fire from nothing is difficult, so every family protects yesterday's flames as carefully as tomorrow's food. You wake once during the night, not because of noise, but because the wind has grown stronger. It whistles softly through the timber walls before disappearing into the darkness outside. Somewhere nearby, one of the goats shifts in its sleep, and the familiar smell of wood smoke lingers beneath the heavy roof. For a few moments, you simply lie there beneath your wool blanket, watching tiny sparks drift upward toward the smoke hole in the ceiling. Eventually, sleep returns. When your eyes open again, the world remains dark. There are no clocks, no calendars hanging on walls. Only habit. Your body has learned exactly when another working day begins. The embers still glow faintly. Someone quietly kneels beside the hearth once again, adding dry pine branches collected days earlier. Within minutes, small orange flames begin dancing across the wood, slowly pushing back the night's cold. The familiar routine repeats itself. Boots, wool tunic, leather belt, thick cloak. Nothing changes, and perhaps that is exactly why Viking life feels so demanding. It is not one difficult day. It is thousands of ordinary days that all require the same determination. Breakfast is little different from yesterday's. Warm barley porridge fills simple wooden bowls. A little dried fish provides salt and protein. Fresh goat's milk is shared among the children before the adults quietly finish whatever remains. Nobody complains. Food is appreciated exactly as it is. Every meal represents hours, weeks, or even months of someone's labor. Outside, the air feels colder than yesterday. Dark clouds gather beyond the mountains, covering the first rays of sunlight before they can fully reach the valley. A raven lands upon the roof of the longhouse, watching silently before disappearing toward the forest. The weather is changing. Everyone notices. No one says very much. They simply work a little faster. Nature decides the pace of life here, not people. Today's work begins away from the fields. Instead, you follow several villagers toward the dense pine forest that borders the valley. Every household needs wood, not only for warmth, but for cooking, repairing homes, building fences, crafting tools, making boats. Almost every object surrounding you began its life as a tree. The forest is one of the village's greatest treasures. The walk is peaceful. Morning mist hangs low between towering trunks while sunlight struggles to break through thick evergreen branches high above. Fallen needles soften each step beneath your boots, filling the air with the fresh scent of pine resin and damp moss. Birdsong echoes gently through the woods. Somewhere farther away, you hear the steady knocking of another woodcutter already at work. Eventually, the group reaches a section of mature trees marked for cutting. Nobody fells trees carelessly. The villagers understand something many people centuries later will forget. If they take too much today, there may be nothing left for their children tomorrow. An experienced elder studies each tree before choosing which ones should fall. The first swing of the axe breaks the silence. Then another, and another. The sound echoes across the forest as would chips scatter onto the soft ground. Cutting a single large pine demands patience rather than strength alone. Every strike must land correctly. Every movement saves energy. After many long minutes, the trunk begins to groan. A loud crack echoes through the trees. Then, slowly, the giant pine leans, before crashing to the forest floor with a thunderous roar. For a brief moment, silence returns. The smell of fresh pine fills the air. Its bright golden wood is exposed for the first time in decades. Immediately, everyone begins working again. Branches are removed. The trunk is cut into manageable sections. Smaller pieces become firewood. Larger beams will eventually strengthen homes or perhaps become part of a new fishing boat. Nothing is wasted. Even bark may be used for kindling. By midday, several wooden sleds are piled high with freshly cut timber. The return journey will be slow and exhausting. Yet as you begin pulling the heavy load back toward the village, you realize that every log represents future warmth. Every beam represents safety. Every tree carefully harvested today helps ensure that another Viking family will survive the coming winter. And once again, you discover that behind every ordinary comfort in Viking life stood countless hours of quiet, unseen labor. The afternoon slowly slips toward evening, but the work refuses to slow with it. The pale northern sun hangs low above the mountains, casting long golden beams across the valley as though trying to stretch every remaining minute of daylight. Here in Scandinavia, every hour matters. The seasons are short, and winter always feels closer than people wish to admit. Even on beautiful days like this one, no family allows themselves to waste precious time. As you return from the forest carrying another bundle of freshly cut timber across your shoulder, you notice that the village has become busier rather than quieter. Smoke rises steadily from every longhouse. The smell of burning pine mixes with fresh bread baking over open fires and the salty scent drifting inland from the fjord. Somewhere nearby, a child laughs before being gently reminded to continue working. Play exists, but it never lasts long. Every pair of hands, no matter how small, has a purpose. Near the center of the village, several men have gathered around the skeleton of a new fishing boat. Thick oak planks rest neatly beside curved wooden ribs already fixed into place. Unlike the great longships that future generations will remember from paintings and legends, this vessel is much smaller. It has been built for the quiet waters of the nearby fjord, where fishing provides far more food than raiding ever could. You walk closer, unable to resist watching. The village's most experienced boat builder runs, his weathered hand along the smooth curve of the hull before nodding with quiet satisfaction. Every measurement exists only in his memory. There are no drawings spread across a table, no written instructions. His knowledge has passed from father to son for generations, preserved not with ink but through patient observation and years of practice. A younger apprentice carefully heats iron rivets inside a small charcoal fire while another shapes wooden pegs with a broad knife. Every movement is slow and deliberate. If a single plank is bent too sharply, it may split. If a rivet is driven carelessly, seawater could one day seep through the hull. The sea forgives nothing. Everyone understands this. You help lift one heavy plank into position while the older craftsmen secure it against the growing frame. The timber bends surprisingly well after being softened by steam rising from large pots of boiling water nearby. It creaks quietly before settling into its final shape, fitting almost perfectly against the neighboring board. No one applauds. There is only a small smile from the master builder. In this village, good work rarely receives loud praise. Its reward comes much later, when the boat safely returns home carrying enough fish to feed several families. The rhythmic tapping of wooden mallets echoes across the settlement. Tap, tap, tap. The sound blends naturally with birds singing overhead and the distant crash of gentle waves against the shoreline. For a moment, you simply stand there listening. It is strangely peaceful. Centuries from now, archaeologists will marvel at Viking shipbuilding, calling these vessels masterpieces of engineering. They will admire their speed, flexibility, and remarkable craftsmanship. But standing here today, surrounded by the smell of fresh cut oak and hot pine resin, none of that matters. The people around you are not trying to impress history. They are simply trying to build a boat strong enough to survive another winter. Leaving the boatyard behind, you continue toward another corner of the village where a different kind of work fills the afternoon air. Here, the steady ringing of metal replaces the gentle rhythm of wooden hammers. The blacksmith is working. Long before you reach the workshop, you hear the familiar sound. Clang, clang, clang. Each strike sends tiny sparks dancing into the air. The forge sits inside a modest timber building with wide openings that allow smoke and heat to escape. Even from outside, waves of warmth roll toward you, a welcome contrast to the cool breeze flowing down from the mountains. Inside, the blacksmith grips a glowing piece of iron with heavy tongs. Its color burns bright orange. With remarkable precision, he places it upon the anvil before raising his hammer once again. The blow lands with perfect accuracy. Then another, and another. Slowly, the rough piece of iron begins changing shape. Every strike carries purpose. Nothing is random. Iron is precious. Mistakes are expensive. Nearby, several finished tools rest upon a wooden bench. Axes, knives, fishing hooks, nails, small farming blades. Each one represents hours of difficult work, beginning long before the metal ever reached the forge. The iron itself has traveled across mountains, forests, and trading routes before arriving here. By the time it becomes a useful tool, dozens of people have already played a part in its journey. You watch as the blacksmith suddenly plunges the glowing blade into a bucket of cold water. A sharp hiss fills the room. Steam rises instantly, carrying the strange scent of hot metal cooling beneath the surface. For a brief moment, everyone pauses. Then the work begins again. Outside the workshop, women sit together spinning freshly cleaned sheep's wool into long strands of thread using simple wooden spindles. Their hands move almost effortlessly, twisting soft fibers into surprisingly strong yarn while quietly sharing stories about relatives, harvests, and weather. One elderly woman teaches a young girl how to keep the thread even. She does not lecture. She simply demonstrates. The child watches carefully before trying again. Knowledge passes from one generation to the next in silence as often as through words. Looking around the village, you suddenly notice something remarkable. Everywhere you turn, someone is creating something. A fisherman repairs his net. A carpenter shapes a new handle for an axe. Children weave small baskets from willow branches. An old man carefully carves a wooden spoon that may last for decades. Nothing is purchased. Almost everything is made. Life in a Viking village is not built upon wealth. It is built upon skill, the ability to mend instead of replace, to create instead of consume, to share instead of waste. As the afternoon sun slowly begins sinking toward the western mountains, the sounds of hammers, saws, spinning wheels, and quiet conversation blend together into a peaceful rhythm that fills the village. It is not the sound of adventure. It is not the sound of conquest. It is the sound of ordinary people building a life with their own hands, one careful task at a time. The warm afternoon slowly begins giving way to evening, yet the village shows little sign of slowing down. Shadows stretch farther across the valley as the sun sinks toward the western mountains, painting the surrounding forests in soft shades of gold and amber. A cool breeze drifts inland from the fjord, carrying with it the familiar scent of salt water, damp earth, and freshly cut timber. You wipe the sweat from your brow after hours of work and notice something unusual. People are beginning to gather, not around the docks, not near the fields, but beside a wide grassy clearing just beyond the center of the village. Men and women arrive one after another, some carrying simple wooden stools while others remain standing. Children follow quietly behind their parents, careful not to interrupt the conversations already beginning. Even the village dogs seem calmer, lying beside their owners as if they understand the importance of the moment. This is no celebration. It is something far more ordinary and far more important. The thing. Centuries from now, historians will describe the thing as one of the oldest forms of public assembly in Europe. Long before parliaments or modern governments, Viking communities gathered in places like this to solve disputes, discuss trade, settle disagreements, and make decisions affecting everyone. There is no throne waiting, no magnificent hall, no crown, only ordinary people standing together beneath the open sky. An older man, respected not because he is rich but because of his wisdom, steps forward. His beard has turned almost completely white, and countless winters have left deep lines across his face. When he speaks, nobody interrupts, not because they are forced to remain silent, but because respect has been earned over many years. The first matter concerns a damaged boundary fence separating two neighboring farms. Neither family raises their voice. Each calmly explains what happened after the previous winter storms. Several villagers offer their memories. Others quietly suggest fair solutions. There is no written law to consult. Instead, justice depends upon reputation, honesty, and the shared understanding that tomorrow everyone must continue living beside one another. Winning an argument means very little if it destroys the peace of the village. Next comes news from a trader who returned only a few days ago from another settlement farther south. He speaks of unusually poor harvests in several neighboring valleys. Iron has become more difficult to obtain. Salt is becoming increasingly valuable. A bridge crossing one of the rivers has been destroyed during heavy spring flooding. Every piece of information matters. The outside world feels distant. News travels only as quickly as a person can carry it. As you quietly listen, you begin realizing that survival depends upon far more than strength. It depends upon trust, upon cooperation, upon knowing that when winter finally arrives, No family truly survives alone. As the gathering slowly comes to an end, no one applauds. There are no official announcements declaring victory. People simply nod to one another before returning to the quiet routines of village life. Problems have been discussed, decisions have been made, and tomorrow everyone will continue working together just as they always have. The evening air grows noticeably cooler. Above the surrounding mountains, the sky begins changing from pale blue to soft shades of orange, pink, and deep violet. The surface of the fjord reflects every color perfectly, making it difficult to tell where the sea ends and the sky begins. You begin walking toward the shoreline. Several fishing boats rest peacefully beside the wooden dock, gently rising and falling with each small wave. Nets hang from tall drying poles, moving slightly whenever the evening breeze passes through them. Wooden barrels filled with salted fish wait to be carried into storage before nightfall. Everything appears calm, yet every object surrounding you tells a story of countless hours of labor. The boats, the nets, the ropes, the barrels, none appeared overnight. Every one of them exists because someone spent days, weeks, or even months creating it by hand. A group of young boys sit near the water's edge watching one of the older fishermen repair a torn net. He works patiently, without hurry. His weathered fingers move almost automatically, tying one careful knot after another. The children ask questions. He answers with quiet smiles. Sometimes he allows them to try. Sometimes they make mistakes. He simply unties the knot and encourages them to begin again. This is how knowledge survives. Not inside books, but inside people. You realize that nearly everything in this village is taught the same way. Boat building, woodworking, farming, fishing, blacksmithing, cooking, storytelling. Each generation quietly hands its knowledge to the next before time has a chance to erase it. The sun finally disappears beyond the mountains. For a few moments, the entire valley falls into complete stillness. Only the gentle sound of water touching the dock breaks the silence. Looking across the peaceful village, it becomes impossible to imagine that these same people will one day become famous throughout Europe. History often remembers their battles, their voyages, their raids. But standing here tonight, none of those things seem important. What truly defines this place is something much quieter. Neighbors helping neighbors, parents teaching children, families preparing for another winter together. Ordinary people living ordinary lives beneath an extraordinary northern sky. And perhaps that is the part of Viking history most worth remembering. By the time darkness begins settling across the valley, the village has grown noticeably quieter. The steady rhythm of axes striking timber has faded. The blacksmith's hammer no longer echoes between the hills. Even the animals seem calmer now, their movements slower as the cool evening air settles over the land. You make your way back toward the longhouse, your boots pressing softly into the damp earth. Thin ribbons of smoke rise from every roof, disappearing into a sky now filled with countless stars. Without the glow of electric lights, the heavens appear almost unimaginably bright. The Milky Way stretches across the darkness like a pale river of light, while the northern horizon still holds the final traces of sunset. Inside the longhouse, warmth welcomes you once again. The fire burns steadily at the center of the room, filling the air with the comforting scent of burning pine and dried birch. Orange flames dance across the dark wooden beams overhead, casting long shadows that gently sway whenever someone walks past. The day's work may be over, But the evening still belongs to quiet tasks. Several women sit together near the hearth, each holding a wooden spindle. Soft sheeps will pass slowly through practiced fingers, twisting into long strands of strong thread. Their hands move with remarkable confidence, almost without thought, while quiet conversations drift naturally through the room. One woman speaks about the coming harvest. Another wonders whether the weather will remain kind long enough to repair the roof before autumn. Someone else quietly laughs while remembering a story from many winters ago. There is no rush. No one checks the time. The only clock here is the fire slowly consuming another piece of wood. Across the room, an elderly grandmother patiently teaches a young girl how to weave wool upon a simple, upright loom. The child struggles at first, pulling one thread too tightly before leaving another too loose. The older woman gently smiles. She untangles the mistake without frustration. Then she demonstrates again, patiently, slowly. Knowledge passes from one generation to the next not through books, but through careful hands repeating the same movements thousands of times. Nearby, another family member repairs a heavy wool cloak damaged during the previous winter. Every stitch matters. Producing cloth requires months of work, from shearing sheep in spring to washing, spinning, weaving, and sewing. Throwing away a torn garment would be almost unthinkable. Nothing in this village is disposable. Everything is repaired. Everything is valued. Everything carries the memory of the hands that made it. As the evening grows later, the smell of supper gradually fills the entire longhouse. A large iron pot hangs above the open fire, gently bubbling as fish, onions, herbs, and barley slowly cook together. The rich aroma mixes with fresh bread warming beside the hearth, creating a comforting scent that reaches every corner of the room. Wooden bowls are quietly placed upon low benches. Simple spoons carved by hand rest beside them. No one eats immediately. Instead, everyone helps. Children carry cups filled with fresh goat's milk. An older boy carefully slices dark rye bread using a small iron knife sharpened earlier that day. Even the youngest family members understand that preparing a meal belongs to everyone. When the food is finally ready, conversation becomes softer. The long day's work has left everyone pleasantly tired. Nobody speaks loudly. There is no need. Outside, the wind brushes gently against the timber walls while rain begins falling lightly upon the turf roof overhead. The soft rhythm of raindrops blends beautifully with the crackling fire, creating a peaceful sound unlike anything found in the modern world. After supper, the bowls are washed using cold water carried from a nearby stream. Nothing remains on the table for long. Food is far too valuable to waste. Even fish bones may later be boiled into broth. Small scraps of bread are saved for tomorrow. Ash from the hearth will eventually help make soap. Almost everything finds another purpose. As the fire settles into glowing embers, the oldest man in the household begins telling a familiar story. It is not read from a book. He knows every word by heart. He speaks of Odin, the wise wanderer who sacrificed an eye in search of knowledge. He tells of mighty Thor protecting both gods and people with his hammer. He speaks of Freya, whose beauty and kindness are remembered in songs passed from generation to generation. The children listen without interruption. Their eyes remain fixed upon the dancing flames. Whether every story is true matters very little. The stories remind people who they are, where they came from, and what kind of courage life sometimes requires. Eventually, one by one, family members begin preparing for sleep. The fire is carefully arranged so that glowing embers survive until morning. Blankets made from thick wool are spread across simple wooden beds covered with straw. Outside, rain continues falling softly across the quiet village. The fjord is hidden beneath darkness. The mountains have disappeared into the night. Only the gentle sound of the wind remains. And as your eyes slowly begin to close beside the warmth of the dying fire, you realize that tomorrow will almost certainly begin exactly as today did, long before sunrise, with another ordinary day in the life of a Viking. By the time autumn quietly slips away, the entire valley begins preparing for something every Viking knows is coming. No one speaks about it with fear, because fear changes nothing. Instead, they work. Every day becomes another opportunity to gather one more bundle of firewood, dry one more fish, repair one more roof, or fill one more storage barrel before the first true snowfall arrives. The mountains are the first to change. Only a few weeks ago, their highest peaks held small patches of white that disappeared beneath the afternoon sun. Now fresh snow gathers there every morning, refusing to melt. Day after day, the white line slowly creeps lower down the mountainsides, as though winter itself is quietly walking toward the village. The air feels different too, carries a sharpness that bites gently at your face each time you step outside. The breeze blowing across the fjord no longer smells only of salt water and pine. Now it carries the unmistakable scent of approaching snow, a cold, clean stillness that everyone recognizes without needing to say a word. The days grow shorter almost without you noticing. Only a short time ago you were still working beneath the evening sun long after supper. Now darkness begins arriving while there is still work left unfinished. Every afternoon seems to end too quickly. There are no clocks, no calendars, only the changing sky. One morning you wake before sunrise as always, but when you step outside the world feels strangely quiet. The birds are gone. The insects have disappeared. Even the forest itself seems to be holding its breath. Looking toward the mountains, you see dark clouds gathering above their snow-covered peaks. Nobody wastes time watching them. Instead, everyone moves faster. Several men drag enormous piles of freshly cut logs toward the longhouses, stacking them carefully beneath wooden shelters where they will remain dry for the months ahead. Each piece of wood represents warmth. Each log may become the difference between comfort and suffering during the long nights still to come. Nearby, women carry baskets filled with onions, turnips, cabbage, and dried herbs into underground storage pits lined with stone. Cool earth helps preserve food long after freezing temperatures arrive. Clay jars filled with butter are sealed with wax. Barrels packed with salted fish are inspected one final time. Nothing is left to chance. Children gather armfuls of dry moss and small branches from the edge of the forest. They laugh quietly while working, but even they understand why the task matters. Without kindling, there is no fire. Without fire, almost nothing else matters. You help repair the roof of the longhouse before winter has the opportunity to test it. Fresh layers of turf are lifted onto the roof one heavy piece at a time. Their thick roots help keep warmth inside while protecting the timber beneath from snow and freezing rain. The work is slow, cold, and exhausting. Your hands quickly become numb. Even through thick wool gloves, the wind finds its way inside. Every breath leaves a cloud floating before your face. Yet nobody complains. Complaining does not stop winter from coming. As the afternoon slowly fades, the first snowflakes begin drifting silently from the sky. They are few at first, tiny, almost weightless. They melt the instant they touch the damp ground. Several children stop working just long enough to watch them fall. One little girl reaches out her hand, smiling as a delicate white crystal lands upon her mitten before disappearing moments later. The adults notice too. No one smiles, not because snow is unwelcome, but because everyone understands what it means. Winter has arrived, and from this moment forward, every decision becomes a little more important. Every meal becomes a little more valuable. Every piece of firewood becomes a little more precious. As darkness settles across the valley earlier than ever before, the village glows softly beneath the warm light escaping from its longhouses. Outside, the first thin blanket of snow slowly begins covering the earth. The familiar dirt paths disappear. The fields vanish beneath white. The forests grow silent. Even the fjord seems darker beneath the heavy winter sky. Standing outside for one last moment before returning indoors, you realize something remarkable. For centuries, people will remember the Vikings for their courage at sea. But perhaps their greatest act of courage was something much quieter. Facing another northern winter, knowing exactly how difficult it would be, and preparing for it anyway. By the following morning, the village looks almost unfamiliar. During the night, the gentle snowfall had quietly transformed everything. The narrow dirt paths have disappeared beneath a thick blanket of white. Wooden fences were soft caps of snow, and the roofs of every longhouse seem to blend naturally into the winter landscape. The towering pine trees surrounding the valley bow beneath the weight of fresh snow, their dark green branches almost completely hidden. For a brief moment, it is breathtaking. The world feels peaceful, almost silent. But beneath that beauty lies the most difficult season of the entire year. You push open the heavy wooden door of the longhouse and immediately feel the cold wrapping itself around you. The air bites at your cheeks, and each breath leaves a cloud drifting into the still morning. The snow beneath your boots lets out a soft crunch with every step, one of the few sounds breaking the quiet. The animals are waiting. They cannot search for food beneath frozen ground. They depend entirely upon the hay gathered months earlier. Inside the animal shelter, the warmth created by their bodies is immediately noticeable. The familiar smell of wool, damp straw, and livestock fills the air as several sheep slowly gather around, expecting breakfast. The goats bleat softly while one of the cows watches patiently from her stall. You spread fresh hay across the floor. Every handful has value. The growing pile inside the storage barn now looks noticeably smaller than it did only a few weeks ago. Without saying anything, everyone notices. Winter has only just begun. Outside, several villagers work together clearing snow from the narrow paths connecting each longhouse. They use broad wooden shovels carved by hand, pushing aside heavy drifts before they harden into solid ice. The work is slow and exhausting. Before long, snow begins falling once again, quietly covering the very paths that had just been cleared. Feels endless. Nature refuses to pause simply because people grow tired. Later that morning, you accompany two neighbors toward the edge of the forest. Not to cut large trees. That work ended weeks ago. Today you gather fallen branches buried beneath the snow. Anything dry enough to feed the fire without wasting valuable timber. The forest has changed completely. Only days ago it echoed with birdsong and rustling leaves. Now, nothing moves. The air itself seems frozen. Every branch is coated in white. Even the familiar stream flowing through the valley has slowed, its edges locked beneath thick sheets of ice. Small animal tracks cross the snow before disappearing into the trees. Perhaps a fox searching for food, or a hare hoping to avoid becoming someone else's meal. You stop for a moment and listen. There is almost no sound at all. No insects, no leaves, only the occasional whisper of the wind moving gently through the snow-covered pines. The silence is unlike anything you have ever known. Beautiful, yet strangely powerful. Returning to the village before nightfall, you notice smoke rising steadily from every chimney. Each longhouse has become its own small island of warmth surrounded by an ocean of snow. Families rarely wander far now. The world beyond the village has become unpredictable. Travel slows. Trade nearly stops. Most days are spent close to the fire, repairing tools, weaving cloth, carving wooden bowls, sharpening knives, telling stories, and waiting patiently for spring. Winter teaches a different kind of strength. Not the strength needed to swing an axe or row a ship, but the strength required to remain patient through long weeks when every day looks almost exactly the same. As darkness falls long before supper, everyone gathers once more around the hearth. Outside, another snowfall quietly begins. Inside, the fire crackles softly while orange light dances across the timber walls. Someone places another log onto the flames, carefully choosing one that is dry enough to burn slowly through the night. Children rest beneath thick wool blankets while the older members of the household quietly mend clothing worn thin by months of work. Nobody knows exactly how many storms still lie ahead. Nobody knows when the snow will finally melt. All they know is that tomorrow morning they will wake before sunrise, feed the animals, protect the fire, conserve the food, and do everything once again. Sitting beside the glowing hearth, watching tiny sparks disappear into the darkness above, you begin to understand something history books rarely mention. The Vikings did not survive because they were fearless. They survived because they prepared, because they worked together, because they respected nature instead of believing they could conquer it. And perhaps the greatest challenge they ever faced was not crossing stormy seas in search of distant lands, but enduring the long, silent northern winters that tested every family, every home, and every ounce of determination they possessed. Outside, snow continues falling without hurry. Inside, the fire continues burning. And somewhere beyond the frozen fjord, spring is already making its slow, unseen journey north, even if no one in the village can yet feel its approach. Winter has settled firmly across the valley now, and with it comes a slower rhythm of life. The fields lie hidden beneath deep snow. The fishing boats remain tied securely along the frozen shoreline, and every path through the village has become a narrow trail carved between white banks that grow higher with each passing storm. Outside, the world seems asleep. Inside the longhouse, however, life continues much as it always has. The fire crackles gently at the center of the room, its warm glow reflecting from wooden bowls, iron tools, and polished drinking cups that hang from pegs along the walls. The smell of burning birch mixes with the rich scent of drying herbs suspended from the rafters above. Bundles of thyme, yarrow, juniper, and wild chamomile sway almost imperceptibly whenever the door opens to admit another gust of cold air. Today, the atmosphere feels slightly different. There is less urgency, not because work has disappeared, but because the village has entered one of the rare evenings when people allow themselves a little more time together. Winter often creates these moments. The storms make long journeys impossible. Fields cannot be planted beneath frozen earth, and darkness arrives so early that families naturally gather around the warmth of the hearth. An elderly woman carefully arranges several small wooden carvings upon a shelf near the fire. They are simple figures. One carries a spear, another holds a hammer, a third wears a long flowing cloak. These are not grand statues like those future civilizations will build from marble. They are modest reminders of the gods who watch over the world. Religion in a Viking village is woven quietly into everyday life. There are no towering cathedrals, no stained glass windows, no rows of polished stone. Instead, faith exists beside the cooking pot, above the doorway, inside the stories grandparents tell their grandchildren before sleep. You watch as the head of the household quietly places a small piece of fresh bread beside one of the carvings. No one makes a dramatic speech. No elaborate ceremony follows. It is simply a small offering, a gesture of gratitude. The harvest was good enough. The livestock survived. The family remains together. For that alone, thanks should be given. The names of the gods are spoken naturally during conversation. Odin, the wanderer who sacrificed comfort in search of wisdom. Thor, whose mighty hammer protects both gods and ordinary people from chaos. Freya, associated with beauty, fertility, love, and abundance. Fjord, whose favor is sought by fishermen before venturing onto dangerous waters. Each god reflects a different part of daily life. They are not distant figures living beyond imagination. They feel close, almost like respected neighbors whose presence can be sensed in the forests, mountains, storms, and sea surrounding the village. A young boy asks why Odin gave up one of his eyes. The oldest man smiles before adding another piece of wood to the fire. Because wisdom always asks for something in return, he says softly. The room falls silent. Even the youngest children listen carefully. Knowledge is valuable here, not because it leads to wealth, but because knowledge keeps people alive. Knowing when snow will fall, knowing how to build a stronger boat, knowing which herbs ease illness, knowing where fish gather beneath winter ice. Wisdom is earned through patience. Perhaps that is why Odin is admired so deeply. Outside, snowflakes continue drifting quietly from the sky. Inside, another story is about to begin. The oldest storyteller shifts a little closer to the hearth as the fire burns brighter. Every face in the longhouse turns toward him. Children sit cross-legged upon thick wool blankets while adults continue quieter tasks without ever taking their attention away from the tale. One woman spins wool upon her spindle. Another carefully repairs a leather glove worn thin by weeks of chopping firewood. A young man smooths the handle of a newly carved wooden spoon with a small knife. No one stops working completely. Stories and work belong together. The old man begins speaking slowly, his voice calm enough to match the rhythm of the flames. He tells of Yggdrasil, the immense ash tree believed to hold the 9 worlds together. Its roots stretch farther than anyone could imagine, reaching places no human will ever see, while its branches rise beyond the clouds themselves. Eagles rest in its highest limbs. Creatures move endlessly along its trunk. Deep beneath its roots lie hidden wells of wisdom older than memory itself. The children picture every word. No paintings are needed. Imagination fills the room more vividly than any mural could. The story drifts naturally toward tales of Thor riding across the heavens. Whenever thunder rolls above the mountains, people believe they are hearing the wheels of his chariot crossing the sky. Lightning flashes become signs of his mighty hammer striking against the forces of chaos. For the children, these stories explain the world. For the adults, they provide comfort. Storms become less frightening when they carry familiar meaning. The conversation eventually turns toward the mysterious runes. One elderly woman opens a small leather pouch and carefully pours several smooth pieces of carved wood into her hands. Upon each is etched a different symbol. Runes are letters, but they are also believed to carry deeper meaning. Some people carve them into walking staffs. Others mark them upon boats before long voyages. Farmers sometimes carve simple symbols above the doorway of a barn, hoping for healthy animals and a successful season. Whether the runes truly possess power is impossible to know. Yet believing they offer protection gives people confidence during uncertain times. Outside, the wind grows stronger. Snow taps gently against the timber walls. Inside, no one seems concerned. The fire continues burning steadily. Warmth fills every corner of the longhouse. Someone quietly pours a little mead into carved wooden cups for the adults. Made from fermented honey, it is enjoyed only on special occasions and in careful amounts. Children receive warm goat's milk instead, smiling just as happily. A soft song begins. No instruments accompany it. Only quiet voices blending together beneath the smoke-darkened roof. The melody is slow, almost hypnotic, passed from one generation to another long before anyone thought of writing it down. Perhaps the words have changed over the centuries. Perhaps they have remained exactly the same. No one can truly say. As the song fades, silence settles comfortably over the room. Not an empty silence, peaceful one, the kind shared by people who know one another so well that conversation is no longer necessary. The fire slowly collapses into glowing embers. One by one, family members prepare their sleeping places. The storyteller places another log upon the hearth, making certain enough coals will survive until morning. Tomorrow will bring more work, more snow to clear, more animals to feed, more tools to repair. Life will continue exactly as it always has. Yet before closing your eyes, you look once more at the quiet faces gathered around the fading fire and realize that the greatest strength of this village has never been its ships, its weapons, or even its courage. It has always been this: a family sharing warmth against the cold, neighbors preserving traditions that stretch back through countless generations, stories carried not by ink upon parchment, but by memory, by voice, and by the steady glow of a fire that has refused to go out through another long northern winter. Morning arrives almost unnoticed. There is no brilliant sunrise pouring through the smoke hole above your head. Thick winter clouds cover the sky long before dawn, turning the world outside into a landscape of soft gray light. The valley seems suspended between night and day, neither completely dark nor truly bright. It is the kind of morning that makes time itself feel slower. You wake to the familiar sound of crackling embers. The fire has survived another night. Someone rose long before everyone else to feed it with carefully chosen pieces of dry birch, ensuring the warmth never completely disappeared. It is a task repeated every single morning throughout the winter, so ordinary that nobody speaks about it anymore. Stepping outside, the cold immediately settles across your face. The air feels astonishingly clean. Every breath stings slightly as it fills your lungs. Snow crunches beneath your boots with a satisfying rhythm while tiny crystals sparkle across the ground, catching what little sunlight manages to slip through the clouds. The village is already awake. Thin columns of smoke rise straight into the still air, a sign that there is almost no wind today. Such mornings are welcomed with quiet gratitude. A calm winter day is an opportunity, a chance to complete tasks that storms often delay. Several villagers gather near the storage buildings. Today they are not preparing for battle, nor are they launching ships. Instead, they are taking inventory. Every barrel is opened. Every sack is inspected. Winter has a way of revealing even the smallest mistake. A single damp storage room can ruin weeks of preserved grain. One cracked barrel may allow precious salt to spill away. A forgotten bundle of dried herbs might slowly rot before anyone notices. You help roll a heavy barrel toward the doorway where more daylight reaches inside. The lid is lifted carefully. Inside lie rows of salted herring packed tightly together, each layer separated by coarse sea salt harvested during the warmer months. The smell is powerful but familiar. These fish may not look impressive, yet they represent security. Food that asks for nothing more than patience. Nearby, another villager checks smoked lamb hanging from thick wooden beams. Each piece has darkened over months above slow-burning fires. The smoke has done more than add flavor. It has protected the meat from decay, allowing it to last through the coldest part of the year. Nothing inside these buildings exists by accident. Every shelf, every hook, every barrel, every woven basket has been arranged with careful thought. A poorly organized storehouse wastes precious minutes searching for supplies. During a harsh winter, even minutes matter. An elderly woman quietly runs her fingers across sacks of barley stacked neatly against the wall. She smiles with quiet satisfaction. There will be enough. Perhaps not for luxury, but enough to see another spring. That single thought eases everyone's mind. Outside, children carry armfuls of firewood toward the longhouses. The pieces are smaller than those carried by adults, yet they move proudly beneath their modest loads. Here, contributing is a source of pride rather than obligation. Every family member, regardless of age, strengthens the household. Looking around the village, you realize something remarkable. Nothing feels hurried. Nobody races from one task to another. Yet by working steadily, patiently, without wasting movement, an enormous amount is accomplished before midday. Perhaps that is one of the greatest lessons life here quietly teaches. Consistency often matters more than speed. As the afternoon settles over the valley, a welcome visitor arrives. Not a warrior, not a king, a trader. His sled, pulled by two sturdy horses blanketed against the cold, slowly enters the village beneath a coating of fresh snow. Frost clings to his thick beard, and his heavy wool cloak is dusted white after several days of travel through the northern wilderness. News spreads quickly. Children are the first to notice him. Within minutes, several adults walk toward the center of the village to greet their guest. Hospitality is important here. Any traveler surviving a northern winter deserves warmth before business. The trader is welcomed inside the largest longhouse where snow melts from his boots beside the fire. A steaming wooden cup is placed into his hands before anyone asks what goods he carries. Only after he has eaten does the trading begin. One by one, bundles wrapped in thick cloth are carefully opened. Fine wool from distant settlements. Small pieces of amber glowing like captured sunlight. Iron bars ready to become tools. A handful of colorful glass beads unlike anything made in this valley. The children stare in quiet amazement. To them, these objects seem almost magical. They are tiny windows into a world far beyond the surrounding mountains. The villagers offer goods of their own. Beautiful animal furs, carefully carved wooden bowls, dried fish preserved with salt, strong ropes twisted from natural fibers. Nothing is exchanged casually. Every item represents many days of labor. Value is measured not only by rarity, but by the time required to create something. As trading continues, conversation naturally shifts towards stories from distant lands. The trader speaks of villages farther south where winter has been unusually mild. He describes frozen rivers wide enough for entire wagons to cross. He mentions merchants arriving from lands so distant that they speak unfamiliar languages. Some have traveled for months, perhaps even years. The children listen with wide eyes. The adults listen differently. They pay attention to practical details. Which roads remain open? Where is iron becoming scarce? Which harbors have frozen? Information can be just as valuable as silver. As evening approaches, the trader prepares to continue his journey before another storm arrives. The villagers help reload his sled. They tighten leather straps, brush snow from the horses, offer one final piece of bread for the road. Then, with a quiet wave, he disappears once again into the white landscape beyond the forest. Soon his tracks become the only sign he was ever there. Then fresh snow begins falling, slowly, patiently, until even those tracks disappear. Watching the empty trail vanish beneath new snow, you realize how isolated this little Viking village truly is. For weeks, sometimes months, the outside world may never return. Yet life continues. Children grow. Stories are told. Tools are repaired. Bread is baked. The fire is kept alive. And beneath the endless northern sky, another quiet day comes to its gentle end. Not with the clash of swords or the roar of battle, but with the comforting certainty that the village has endured one more winter's day together. The winter that once seemed endless begins to loosen its grip so gradually that, at first, hardly anyone notices. The mornings remain cold. Snow still blankets the fields. The mountains continue wearing their brilliant white crowns. And yet, something feels different. When you step outside before dawn, the air no longer bites quite as sharply against your face. The wind still carries the scent of snow, but beneath it lingers something almost forgotten. The earthy smell of damp soil waiting patiently beneath the frozen ground. For the first time in many months, you hear birds. Only one or two at first. A distant raven glides silently above the valley. Soon afterward, a pair of small woodland birds settle upon the branches of a pine tree outside the village. Their quiet song seems almost unfamiliar after such a long season of silence. You pause for a moment simply to listen. No one says anything, but everyone notices. The animals notice as well. The sheep seem slightly more energetic each morning. The goats eagerly push against the wooden gate whenever someone approaches with fresh hay. Even the horses lift their heads toward the warming breeze drifting through the valley. Nature is changing, slowly, patiently, exactly as it always has. Life inside the village begins changing with it. The heavy piles of firewood stacked beside every longhouse are noticeably smaller now. Months of careful burning have reduced towering stacks into modest rows of neatly arranged logs. Yet unlike the anxious weeks of early winter, nobody worries anymore. The worst has passed. Inside the storage buildings, families inspect what remains of their preserved food. Barrels of salted fish still rest safely against timber walls. Bundles of smoked meat hang quietly from dark wooden beams. Clay pots filled with butter remain cool beneath layers of straw. The careful planning of the previous autumn has succeeded. No family has grown wealthy. No feast has filled every table. But everyone has survived. And here, That is victory enough. Later in the morning, you accompany several villagers toward the edge of the frozen fjord. Not to fish. Not yet. Instead, everyone wishes to see what the sea itself is doing. The walk feels strangely peaceful. The snow beneath your boots has become softer than it was only a few weeks ago. Small patches of dark earth begin appearing beneath the trees where sunlight lingers longest. Tiny streams of meltwater trickle quietly between rocks, carrying pieces of broken ice toward the shore. Reaching the fjord, you stop. The ice remains thick across much of the surface. Yet near the shoreline, something remarkable has happened. A narrow ribbon of open water reflects the pale afternoon sky. Small waves gently lap against the rocks. The sea is breathing again. One elderly fisherman kneels beside the water without speaking. He simply watches. His face carries a quiet smile. Soon the boats will return. Soon the nets will be mended once more. Soon another season of work will begin. Nothing about that thought feels exhausting. Instead, feels comforting, because routine has carried this village through another winter. As you begin walking home, sunlight finally breaks through the clouds for the first time in many days. Golden light pours across the snow-covered valley. The white landscape glitters like thousands of tiny crystals. Smoke rises peacefully from every longhouse. Children laugh while throwing handfuls of wet snow at one another. Someone begins repairing a fishing net outside rather than beside the fire. Life is slowly moving outdoors again. Winter is leaving, not all at once, but one quiet day at a time. As evening settles gently across the valley, you find yourself standing just beyond the last longhouse, looking back toward the little village that has quietly become home. When you first arrived, everything seemed unfamiliar. The endless work, the cold mornings, the simple meals, the smoke-filled longhouse, the constant rhythm of labor that stretched from sunrise until long after darkness had fallen, felt demanding, perhaps even impossible. But now, after living through the changing seasons, you understand. You understand why every piece of firewood mattered, why every fish was carefully preserved, why every roof was repaired before winter, why children learned to work almost as soon as they could walk, why neighbors helped one another without expecting reward, because survival was never the responsibility of one person. It belonged to everyone. The stories told centuries later often celebrate the Vikings who crossed great oceans, discovered distant lands, and fought famous battles. Those people certainly existed, but they were only a small part of this world. Most Vikings never became legendary warriors. Most never saw distant kingdoms. Most spent their lives exactly here, raising families, planting barley, repairing fences, building boats, weaving cloth, feeding animals, watching children grow, growing old beside the same mountains where they were born. History rarely remembers ordinary people, yet ordinary people built history. Every famous voyage depended upon farmers who harvested grain. Every successful ship relied upon craftsmen who shaped timber. Every warrior returned hoping to find a warm fire still burning inside the family longhouse. Without villages like this, there would have been no Viking Age at all. The last light of day slowly fades behind the mountains. The snow reflects soft shades of pink before gradually becoming blue beneath the coming night. One by one, warm lights appear inside each longhouse. Families gather once again around their hearths. Someone begins preparing tomorrow's bread. Someone else mends a fishing net. Children curl beneath thick wool blankets while an elder quietly begins another familiar story. Outside, the village grows silent. Only the gentle sound of the nearby stream can be heard now, flowing a little stronger each day as winter slowly releases the land. Above you, countless stars emerge once again across the northern sky, exactly as they did hundreds of years ago, exactly as they do today. You take one final slow breath of the cool Scandinavian air, the scent of pine, with smoke, fresh water, and distant salt from the fjord. It is a smell you will never forget. Then you quietly step back inside the longhouse. The heavy wooden door closes behind you with a soft thud. The warmth of the fire surrounds you once more. The voices of the family become softer, then quieter, until only the gentle crackling of burning wood remains. Your eyes grow heavy. The flames dance slowly across the timber walls. Outside, spring continues its patient journey across the northern world. Inside, another peaceful day has come to its end, and as sleep gently begins to find you, one final thought lingers in your mind. Perhaps surviving a single day as a Viking was never really about strength. It was about patience, about community, about respecting the land that sustained you, and about finding quiet contentment in the ordinary moments that, together, became an extraordinary life. Good night, and thank you for spending a peaceful day in the Viking Age.